Hello, everyone. I'm happy to have today a young professor with us. He is a professor at OP Jindal University in Sonipat, Haryana. So let's listen to him. Right now, we have with us Rohith Jyothish. Over to you, Rohith.
Thank you, Professor Mathur, for this opportunity. Like Professor said, my name is Rohith Jyothish. I'm an assistant professor at the Jindal School of International Affairs at OP Jindal Global University in Sonipat, Haryana. It's about 45 kilometers from New Delhi. I've been here for almost 4 years now, and I've taught mostly undergraduate students in political science courses like, say, political economy of development, electoral politics, principles of economics. I've also designed electives like political economy of development in South Asia, global labor studies, environment and energy economics, and this would be for BA and MA students across the university. So I'm currently also the coordinator for our department's doctoral committee. My PhD was in labor and development studies, mostly economics, at the Center for Informal Sector and Labor Studies in Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. My thesis at JNU was used a Marxist political economy framework to analyze capital accumulation in India's information technology sector. And I would say most of my time in JNU in JNU was kind of spent exploring radical theory in particular, and also other heterodox schools of thoughts in sort of an interdisciplinary way. So I would say a lot of the research ideas I had were from following reading groups, workshops, conferences, newsletters, and seminars from what our department in particular in JNU specialized in. So there were these groups like the Global Labor University, which was which is a network that works together with trade unions and multiple universities across universities in the global south and north, and the International Labor Organization. Then there was an International Labor Process Conference, which is this conference that is mostly based in the UK, but they specialize in a lot of different ways of doing research in on labor and supply chains, especially, and also sort of classic labor theory. I've also learned a lot from there is this post-Keynesian society in the University of Greenwich. They're excellent in organizing workshops for especially young doctorate students, and the way they go about their program is really exemplary. I've learned a lot from all of this. And more recently, and this is more tied to the researchers in our department in JNU, is the Agrarian South Network. So the Agrarian South Network is basically it's one of the few networks that I've seen that really uh, puts the South in global South, in the sense that it's actually researchers from say countries in sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and Latin America. So it's an excellent group of researchers who are actually based in these countries. So not just those who are working from the global North. So all of these are probably, as an academic, I would say a lot of sort of training I got would be from engaging with all of them. But I would say that's just one part of the story. So prior to formal academics, I had a full-time career with non-profit organizations, and they are, I mean, they're of different kinds. So they would be think tanks. They could also be social movements, and some of them are also civic media organizations.
Hmm.
So I used to work with people who mostly analyze government budgets. Sort of two organizations in particular, I work with them full time. One was the Institute for Sustainable Development and Governance, which is in Thiruvananthapuram, Kerala. And the other is the Center for Budget and Governance Accountability, which is this organization that's been there for 15 odd years in New Delhi. If I could sort of try and summarize what they do, the goal was to sort of uh, translate some of the more abstruse or I would say esoteric aspects of fiscal policy in a way that social movements could use it for their activism. So in the sense that if you say something like an old Kothari Commission report says 6% of GDP should be spent on education, what exactly does that mean?
mm,
So, as researchers, we would sort of go through the budget documents at the local level or at the state level and the union budgets and say it means that if the budget increases by this much, it would mean you have more money for schools and uniforms
mm,
and possibly better, higher quality toilets for boys and girls in these kinds of schools. So, we had to sort of translate that language into something which is understandable for people.
mm,
Um, and it was a great experience working with them for 4 5 years. They were all sort of related organizations. I got to travel all across the country, so organize workshops and pre-budget consultations from say Trivandrum to Guwahati to Ranchi, Pune, Jaipur, Delhi. So you really get a sense of the entire country and how diverse it is. And I would say one of the best experiences of working in that, I would say it's broadly a public policy group, but a very different vision of public policy than say technical analysis of modeling and macroeconomic forecasting. It's more, I would say they focused more on political economy, and which meant that you had to have sort of an eye for politics in the sense that who is the right kind of politician or bureaucrat to reach out to, who would champion a particular kind of social policy, would they listen to you, can you talk to them? So I would say more than any kind of technical policy analysis, what I learned by working with them was sort of network building, sort of also sort of building allies in that sense, if you can call it that, for a particular kind of social policy. So, and I would say one of the best experiences in doing that was that maybe around the time that the union budget is being presented by the finance minister, 20 or 25 of us would be sort of huddled around discussing the budget. So an exciting day
mm,
whenever the budget
mm,
is being presented. And we would come out with a report which is about 150 pages long within 24 hours. So which means that we would be sitting throughout the night and each of us would have a portfolio. Most of the time
mm,
my portfolio would be taxation.
mm,
So I was the only one who worked on the revenue side. Everybody else in my sort of organization would be working on the expenditure side. So
mm,
healthcare, water and sanitation,
mm,
minorities,
mm,
so Dalits and Adivasis, all these groups, how much budget is being allocated. And
mm,
we would be able to develop a template whereby we could analyze all of this in a short space of time.
mm,
And uh, it I understood, I always wondered looking at it from the outside, how did they do it in 24 hours? It's impossible. But then when you work with them, you realize that the analysis is not just taking place in that 24 hours. It's just years of experience,
yeah,
knowing where exactly where the budget items are and how it's being allocated,
mm,
and then developing templates as to how to present it in the most accessible way. And
mm,
within a few days, they would also organize a budget consultation in the sense that uh, it's a post-budget discussion where they would invite economists, activists, and journalists, and then it
mm,
would always be filled with people. And I was really blown away by the level of organization when people did that. So more than I would say technical analysis, what I learned was all of this. So uh, during that time, you would uh, there are certain aspects which you don't really expect when you work in these places. Is that when you're in school or college, uh, you definitely heard of the budget if you are interested in economics somewhat. But what you don't realize is just how poorly formatted it is as the way the data is presented. So one of the first shocks that you realize is that you have to spend a significant portion of your time doing data entry, which is
yeah,
this unstructured PDFs, and
yeah,
especially the lower you go in terms of the tiers of government, the quality of data would suffer quite a bit,
yeah,
which means that you have to sometimes check with the department
mm,
again, saying, "Are you sure this is the data?" Because
yeah,
there are a lot of issues with that. Another thing you learn is that sometimes there are certain documents which are just not available. It means that you have to file right to information reports, requests rather, and once you come out with all of this, sometimes you have to publicize it, which means that you write press releases, then putting it together in an accessible language. So learning all of this was an amazing experience. And the culmination of that would be that we worked with us, sort of we were able to raise funding, and we were sort of working together with some software engineers, data scientists, and we sort of put together all our understanding of budgets in one portal called openbudgetsindia.org.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy to see that even sort of 8 9 years after I worked on it, it's still active and they're updating that data, where all of these unstructured PDFs are converted into spreadsheets, and they're put together in an sort of comparable way. So right now, if anyone wants to analyze it, you don't have to sit throughout the night comparing states. It's already been done in an accessible way by a lot of software engineers. So all you need to do as a researcher is go in there and see education Karnataka, education Orissa. You can compare the two states in one go very easily. So this was not possible earlier, and this is what I was able to sort of learn from working in these sort of places. And when I and after working there for 5 6 years, I would say I moved on to from these organizations and enrolled in a PhD in JNU. And at that time, while working for the budget groups, I was really interested in problems around open data, open source software, privacy issues. But somehow, I would say, because I had gone so far away from pure academics, I think I struggled quite a bit to study all of those issues in an sort of an academic way. I would say a lot of the time, I erred on the side of being an activist rather than a pure academic. So it has its pros and cons. The pros would be that you are always engaged with the issue, you're very committed to it, and you work on it 24/7. You have so much intellectual curiosity associated with it. But
Mm.
at the same time, I think to reach a higher level of analysis, you really do need to engage with academic literature. And I think I did struggle with it while looking at all of these issues. It became a kind of just putting together data in a spreadsheet and then just writing one article after the other. It was also a positive in the sense that I was able to write fast a lot of articles, but at the same time, academic papers, I don't think I had the capability to write it at the time.
Yeah.
So what I did at the time was then so one of the big issues when you work in aspects of welfare or social policies at that time was the introduction of the world's largest biometric program, so in Aadhaar or the
Yeah.
UID,
Yeah.
right? So uh, and this was very interesting because uh, at the same time that I was working on this portal, a lot of the issues associated with open data and privacy and security, I was able to connect that with the larger Aadhaar project. And while sort of seeing the Aadhaar project, and because a lot of our work involved field work as well, what you see is that the vision of governance put forward by biometric authentication and then that providing a public service delivery was not exactly working on the ground. So we were able to see that quite a bit in different parts of the country. And so something a lot of us did was start this group called Rethink Aadhaar. And what we did was documented exclusions of especially because of the introduction of Aadhaar
Mm.
in different welfare schemes. So we would see in Rajasthan, we would see ration sort of food which was supposed to be distributed being just not happening because of the introduction of Aadhaar. And this
Mm.
is a case where you had to have multiple high level technology work in these areas where you don't even have a normal shop. So, and when you live in one of these places, you'll really get a sense of that. So, while I was doing that, I probably came across many organizations and social movements, and particularly the Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangadan or the MKSS with Aruna Roy and Nikhil Dey. So they provided this opportunity for some of us to travel to these rural areas in Rajasthan. And while we were there, a lot of the data that I used to analyze a couple of years before, I got to see what it actually means on the ground. And that really shakes you in a sense that you go there and you read a lot about the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, which is about providing 100 days of wage labor for rural India. And when you go there, the kind of work that those women and men do in the peak heat of Rajasthan, and you realize, is this progress? Is this the most we can imagine? And that really makes you wonder about a lot of things. And that's when I knew that policy research of the kind that I was doing, as valuable as it was, I felt that I had to go probably 2 or 3 steps higher. And at the time, beyond that, there were other organizations like Satark Nagarik Sanghatan, which is this organization in Delhi, Center for Internet and Society, which is this research group that really looks at these issues in the use of internet or digital technology in any kind of public sphere. And they basically talked about how digital technology shouldn't be used in governance, and that again was an eye opener, that how difficult it was to understand these issues, because you had to be a lawyer, you had to be a technologist, you had to be an economist or a broader social scientist, and then you had to be a journalist to write it all in an accessible language. So all of that were very, very useful experiences. And probably I was doing all of this while doing a PhD on a completely different issue. So it was a kind of an interesting experience. And I would say towards the end of my PhD, towards the last year of PhD, COVID hit. So, which meant that everything was delayed. So, but thankfully, what happened was that I got an opportunity to do a teaching fellowship at the Department of Political Science in Ashoka University. And it was there that I realized that a lot of the academic reading I was missing, which uh, didn't allow me to sort of put together in sort of more concrete terms what I was seeing on the ground, was actually there in political science. And I had not had any formal training in political science till then. So then I read a lot about, say, federalism, welfare regimes, state capacity. Very interestingly, I thought every economist should read these issues as well, because especially when you're working in social policy, public administration is there's so much literature in public administration which is so valuable. And I'm really thankful for that stint at Ashoka, where while I was doing the PhD, I was reading this as well. So if I could do my PhD all over again, and or if I could do a postdoc, I would probably do something on this. So in that sense, the experience at Ashoka allowed me to be comfortable with, say, economics, political science, and maybe on a very superficial level, international affairs as well, which is probably how it opened doors for me in the newer private liberal arts universities, because I saw that a lot of these universities propping up across the country were doing interesting research. So you could look at Ashoka, Jindal University, then there's Kriya towards the south, Shivnadar University, Ahmedabad University, Flame, all of them were doing interesting things. And that's how I gained sort of access to that world. And I thought, okay, if I could carry on this research here, then this would be a good way to take forward my research. And it's been a great experience so far. I would say one of the things that's very clear to me is that uh, this is the first time seeing Ashoka in general where I felt that there is serious training in undergraduate level for social sciences and humanities. Because I would say in India, when you're here and you've not studied abroad, most of what you would talk about are IITs and IIMs. IITs are for BTech, and if you talk at medicine, also you can say AIMS. AIMS is also, MBBS and postgraduate. But for humanities and social sciences, high quality options were very few. And especially if you done a BA and you didn't have access to Delhi University, and then you are trying to sort of get into an MA, and prior to the existence of a CUET, which was introduced recently as a common exam for everyone to get into MA programs or BA programs, what you had was you travel to different parts of the country and you write about 8 or 9 exams, and then you wait around hoping for something to come through, which was just not a practical way to function, but that's how it was for a long time. And I went through that. Luckily, I got into a few places, and which is why I made it out. But a lot of my friends didn't, and they kind of gave up the idea of working in academics. So, and I would say in school or college, uh, when you are not from Delhi or one of the big metros, it's actually a challenge to pursue research. And I would say when I was younger, I was absolutely, I don't think I uh, did enough, or I even had the sort of exposure to think that this is how you build a career in research. I would say because most of the people in my family are sort of surrounded by books, as you were saying, that's what I also emulate here in my home. Like whenever I see a book, I buy it, I read it, I put it together on a shelf. So I read, I try to explain what I read. Whenever I feel as if have a lot more to contribute about what I've read, I write about it. It's as simple as that. I don't see myself as a very sophisticated academic. It's more of an intellectual curiosity, and I think you can have that about anything. And so when it comes to the particular fields that I research in, um, so for the purpose of a discussion like this, I would say it's fiscal federalism, or so tax policy, the welfare regime, and more recently, I've been trying to read a bit about so the fiscal aspects of a just transition or climate change. So that's a bit more in a nascent stage. I haven't published anything yet, just a working paper. But primarily, I would say this is what I would focus on. So my journey in that sense has always been, and I've never been a career-oriented person. I wouldn't say that. If I could quote a book that I used to really like when I was young, which was Man versus Wild, in that he would say, I mean, he's not a great example to follow given the way the book went, but he used to say, career is a 20th century invention. So now that I've studied labor, I've also know that that's factually true, because it's following the industrial revolution that you had that. But generally, I would say I go where I'm sort of, if it piques my intellectual interest, I go in that direction. I generally don't follow a certain path, and if I have anything to write about, I quite would like to write a lot more non-fiction, more than academic papers. I hope to be able to write a lot more nonfiction. I always admire scholars who can write complex papers, but at the same time write in the most accessible way. So I always on the lookout for those kinds of books, and all the books around me are actually scholars from that ilk. So that's how I would say I look at everything. Yeah. Professor, you're on
I
mute.
know, I know. Thank you so much. I'm sorry to say I have only a limited time because there's
Yeah.
so many things I'd like to discuss with you and talk about. Okay, your talk is just sparking so much interest in me, but let me just stick to one key point that you made. I mean, it's a combination of 2 points that you made. One is that the ground reality in India is very diverse. Okay. And the other is, of course, that in making public policy, you have to see who your allies are. Okay. You can't just do public policy in abstract.
Yeah.
But you have to see the local ground reality. I'm combining your 2 points. You have to see the local ground reality, and you have to see who is going to support it.
Yeah.
Right. This is the key to it. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, uh, you know, 3.5, 5 years ago, I started writing that it's now too late or too wrong to think that India's economic progress depends upon the PM alone.
Yeah.
It depends upon the chief ministers. And I wrote my slogan, wake up, wake up, wake up. It's not the PM, it's the CM also. So 5 times. But nobody is woken up to it. People still focus on the union budget, whereas the reality is that the union budget, in my opinion, is no longer the key to economic growth. What the chief ministers do is the
Yep.
key to growth. Okay. And also the way they run their subsidy schemes is
Yep.
the key to the quality of life. Okay. So there, and when I wrote my book 3.5 years ago, India 2047, chapter 2 is on what I call as meta-economic factors. Meta-economic factors are not economic factors, but they are non-economic factors that affect economic progress.
Yep.
And one of them, I wrote what's in the Constitution and so on, right? Okay, so I am very much in sympathy with you that we are no longer at that stage of development where one size fits all policy
Yep.
was workable. Workable in the sense that we didn't even have the capacity down at the state level, down at the panchayat level, down at the district level. So you had to work with one size fits all. But today, if you want to think of a one size fits all, and you go out there and you say, what is this?
Yep.
This size fits no one, right?
Yeah.
This size fits no one. You have to have a better way to do this, and you're calling it fiscal federalism. But that is the key to it, that look,
Yep.
you cannot make policy anymore at the national level, except certainly macroeconomic policy has to be uniform. So that has to be national. Okay.
Yep.
They're not going to have statewide foreign exchange or interest rate policies and so on. And some things have to be national, but even labor laws, for example, you are a labor person. I
Yep.
mean, honestly, you cannot just have a one size fits all. And remember, many of the states are larger than most countries.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
When you think, oh, it's just a state, you say, what? You go to Sri Lanka, I mean, and you go even to Pakistan.
Yeah.
It's 1/7 of India.
Yeah.
Right? 1/7. And yet we are quite happy to have a Pakistan-wide policy as if with Pakistan. But we have to recognize that there is a need for decentralization.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the only way that economic progress, and not just economic progress, I'm saying political progress, social progress, can come only if you let the states and down to, what are you talking about states, go to North Bengal. I mean, you've been all over. Rajasthan has two parts. There's the desert
Yeah.
part and there's the non-desert part.
Yeah.
People think Rajasthan is the desert state. Well,
Yeah.
guys, just go to Kota.
Yeah.
Where so many go to get BTech degree education.
Right.
There's no
Yeah.
desert there.
Yeah.
There's no
Yeah.
desert.
Yeah.
And so, this whole notion of even not decentralizing to the chief minister, and then the chief minister refusing to give power to the city administrators, right? And then the Panchayati Raj just sitting there, tier 3 constitutional bodies doing nothing.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, you've been to, what has the Panchayati Raj bodies done?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't find any report that says, they've achieved this. But so the whole focus remains on the union government.
Yep.
And that has to change. It has
Yep.
to change if we are to have quick and economic progress and equality, more
Yep.
important, equality. Otherwise, we are going to have lagging states and leading states. Too
Yep.
many of them. Okay, the big diff. Okay, anyway, so I am very much interested in what you said, and there's a lot more to discuss, but I think that's enough from me. Let me stop and let you react.
Yeah, so I certainly agree with what you mentioned. And I would say when you reading about federalism and fiscal federalism at large, uh, one of the things I realized very recently, I should say quite late, I should have known this a long time ago, which is uh, the federalism in every country in many ways is a historical accident.
Yes.
So if you look at Europe or America or India or Brazil, wherever you look at, it's a historical accident. And then we are sort of trying to correct it based on the governance challenges of today. So there is always a tension between national government and a subnational, various subnational governments. And that's the challenge we constantly face. And if you look at fiscal federal challenges in particular in the last 10 odd years, I'm currently working on a book chapter for that, on a book that basically is analyzing fiscal federal trends and the politics of welfare for the last 10 years. So while doing research for that, one thing is very clear to see that it constantly oscillates. So on one level, you see the center suddenly realizing that, okay, we need to devolve more resources to the state governments. And then after a few years, it going back to what it was before through other channels. Because that tension always exists. And as you rightly pointed out, political science literature has said it for a long time that since the 90s, political federalism has been very successful
Yes.
in the sense that chief ministers have become more important, and that's good. That's good for democracy.
Well,
But
let
at
me
the
stop you there for a second. Actually, that is the outcome of the 1991 economic reforms. Most people don't realize this. But what the economic reforms did was they took back the power that the union government had usurped
Yep.
and gave it back to the chief ministers.
Yep.
It wasn't a political reform, it was the abandonment of centralized economic planning,
Yep.
which quietly gave back the power to the chief ministers. And that's why we have now recognizable names as chief ministers. In the old days, yes, we had very many recognizable names, but they were independence movement stalwarts.
Yep.
And so, you talk to BC Roy or you talk to Govind Pant of UP, or, CR and all. These guys were Independence Day stalwarts, so they were really big.
Yep.
Or if they were not, they were guys who could collect money and provide that money to the political parties for fighting
Yep.
elections.
Yep.
But they were not people who were doing much for their states.
Yep.
The 1991 reforms allowed the chief ministers to do a lot more for their states.
Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry to talk so much. Please go ahead.
No, no. I was actually listening to one of your other episodes with, I think it was with Srikanth Vishwanathan,
Yes,
and because I'm familiar with his work when I was in
yeah,
the sort of non-profit
yeah,
space, and at the time I used to attend a lot of events by Janagraha because I
yeah,
found their ideas very interesting, especially
yeah,
with respect to urban governance, and my own experience trying to, and I would say before I even read anything about urban governance. As fresh out of my MA, one of the first things I tried to do was engage with local government because I
yeah,
felt that I needed to know what local government looked like. And it's at that time that I realized, oh, there is some serious, there are some serious problems here. And
yeah,
I was doing it in my own hometown.
yeah,
And so I was able to gain access to a lot of places because I was a citizen right there. They
yeah,
recognized me. They didn't see me as a threat. And I was a young guy, so people didn't really see me as a threat. So I was able to go to different places. And that's when I really understood that there is a lot that needs to be done here.
yeah,
And one of the basic ideas of federalism, decentralization. So in Kerala, there is this institution. At the time, it was very prominent. And these days, I'm not very sure. But the Kerala Institute of Local Administration, they would always emphasize functions, functionaries, and finances.
yeah.
All three need to go to the local level. Otherwise, we are just not going to be able to do things at scale.
Okay.
You just say things at the top and it remains there. But despite that, I think a lot of the problems still remain. But what I've understood was that, and I think at the time I had the opportunity to go to another organization in Hyderabad.
Mm.
That was, I think it was NIRD, National Institute of Rural Development.
Yeah,
They also study a lot of local governance issues. And my experience in engaging with these organizations was that they would say uh, and one experience in particular, maybe that would made this issue clearer. So I was engaging with this researcher who was coming from Uttar Pradesh, and he was talking to me about wanting to study Kerala as a model for local government. And my experience at the time, not having read the literature, was what model? But I know relative to other states, Kerala is doing better. But what I'm seeing in person was not great.
Yeah,
And in the news all the time, you had this issue of waste disposal, which was
yeah,
Kerala was failing at it miserably, especially the Thiruvananthapuram Municipal Corporation.
yeah.
There was this big issue regarding a place called Vilappil Shala,
Mm.
and now it's actually quite common across the country. Uh, in fact, in Sonipat, I'm living right next to a huge garbage dump
Right.
because this is supposed to be one of the largest garbage dumps in Asia, apparently,
Yeah,
which is awful. And it's affecting the groundwater. And now they're introducing incinerators here, which is affecting the air pollution.
yeah,
While in Trivandrum, when I was looking at these issues, and this colleague came over, I took him to different places. And the first thing he told me was, "Oh, you guys actually have an office."
yeah,
And I realized that him coming from, I think he was coming from Balrampur in UP, where there is no such thing as a panchayat office.
yeah,
So, and that's when I realized, okay, it's really bad in other parts of the country.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Uh, and another aspect which also comes out in research is by Devish Kapoor has written about this, the
yeah,
political. Because
yeah,
he writes about how little the number of staff exist at the local level. And I
yeah,
was able to see that in the sense that the day I went to collect some data from the local government that was dealing with this garbage disposal, there was no one in office.
yeah,
Surprised. I thought Kerala was better than this. And then when I asked around, it was because there was one panchayat secretary that was dealing with the finances for three panchayats in the region.
yeah,
And he fell ill. So if he falls ill, that one person falls ill, the entire budgeting aspect of that whole area completely stops. So, and then I happened to run into the female head of the panchayat because it's a reserved position.
right,
And that lady was telling me how she has a day job because being the head of a panchayat doesn't pay much. It's like
right.
100 rupees or 200 rupees honorarium at the time.
Yeah,
And so she had to do a day job and in between that come and deal with this, with such little stuff. And if this was the case in a model state, you can
right.
imagine what's going on in other parts
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
country. Yeah. So this is basically my view. Yeah.
Well, okay, thank you so much. We are, there's no time limit, but I think we have said a lot and you have provided us so many fresh ideas. I do want to talk to you offline also. So, as my custom is these days, the final word from you.
Okay. My final word, and I would say I'll probably try and echo what I was saying to a bunch of students last month. So I happened to get an opportunity to speak at a college in Trivandrum where both my grandparents used to teach. So in while I was there, I saw a lot of the signs that is a problem with the universities in India today. So generally, when we talk about problems of academics, especially social sciences in India, we talk about the big universities, the famous ones. But most of the students study in state universities and colleges under state universities, like the ones I visited. And I studied in one of those types of colleges in my undergraduate level. So I know uh, how much they struggle for resources. So my parting message to all those students was that don't lose hope, and at the same time be optimistic because there are a lot of resources now that are available online, and your job as students would be to find solidarity in fellow learners. You'll always find intellectually curious young people among your group, and it's sometimes they're the least expected kind of people. So if you find your group, you can always work together and be part of the solution, and not always wait till one entity at the top gives you something. We don't need to wait for charity in that sense. We can work together and do your own reading groups, and that itself can be an avenue for your growth. For instance, if you check online for any subject that you're interested in, you can get the course syllabi from MIT or Harvard or Brown if you want. You can get those syllabus, and you even also have sources now to download those books, and you can download those books and discuss among yourselves in that group, and then prepare yourselves for all the challenges that you want to take if you are interested in the social sciences and humanities.
Mm,
I
mm,
would say you need an entrepreneurial spirit in that sense to survive in today's
mm.
world. And I think that's important. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Rohit. That was indeed a very, we have come out of one of those colleges. It's a remarkable journey,
Yeah.
but I think too many people in India ignore those colleges.
Yeah.
Far too. It's just we are living with the icing on the cake when we don't have the cake.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no cake, but we have the icing. I hear students from Bihar saying, "Sir, we don't even get our degrees in time because they don't
Yeah.
have classes on time
Yeah.
and they don't have exams on time and they don't give the results on time. So a
Yeah.
3-year degree takes 4 years because they don't even do it on time. So Kerala, at least they have the exams on time, but in Bihar, they don't have the exams on time. So we really are missing out a lot. But thank
Yeah.
you so much for that. Let's end it here today. I'll be back with another young person or an expert soon. Till then, bye, everybody. Bye.